very interesting how our appearances may lead others to think that we are or are not something that we feel differently about. In life, I feel many people trust their initial first judgments of a person, or first impressions perhaps, sometimes a little too readily. And oftentimes, if we take the time for second chances, getting to know somebody, we might find some of our dearest friends and loved ones are just behind that initial judgment. Hello, my friends. My name is Spencer. I'm a maker, and I love stories. Today we're going to be going over the concept of the wolf in sheep's clothing trope, this theme that some people attribute to Aesop's fables, some people attribute it to the New Testament, but the concept, regardless of its origin, is fascinating and certainly very relevant to all of our lives. The sort of initial idea is that a wolf disguises itself as a sheep and then goes to be among the sheep to discreetly kill the sheep. And we often say that someone who is a wolf in sheep's clothing is someone who is using either their status or their appearance or something about them that is untrue to deceive others around them. But I want to widen the scope of this very idea to talk about first impressions. So I'm sure that there are people, if there is anyone listening in right now, who thankfully have some very dear friends in their life, or a life partner, or any sort of loved one that isn't someone you were born into circumstance to be around all the time, like a sibling or something like that. And oftentimes, these folks in our lives, they end up being dear friends only after an initial period of sort of prejudgment. I know I certainly have many friends who have started off as someone I would consider to be not my vibe, or someone who made a first impression on me that I thought, I'm not going to be friends with this person. And then only through giving them another chance did I truly find, thankfully, friends that I will remain friends with, I foresee, for my entire life, and hopefully beyond. So first impressions are something that are very powerful, and we all have intuitions. Some people have very powerful, or they would consider very powerful intuitions with people, learning to read people. And in truth, this intuition certainly has its merits, but you also have a mind, and you also have discernment of your own that is informed by your life experience. So, to judge one without really knowing them is, I think a lot of people listening could get behind the idea, sort of fraught with misconceptions. And that we often do this regardless is a pity, I feel. A way that we can ensure that we have fewer friends in this life. However, our intuition is also a real thing, but it should always be questioned, I feel. And we should always treat everything in our life with some degree of discernment, and I would argue simultaneously without condemnation, or at the very least, without a condemnation right off the bat. I personally, if you've seen me in any of these videos, or if you know me personally, I would certainly consider myself to be a sheep in wolf's clothing. And I feel I've devoted my entire adult life so far to the idea of trying to be softer a person and to always try and not prejudge, but to treat everyone with kindness where I can. However, my outward appearance oftentimes, and with my sort of resting jerk face that I have, often leads people to make prejudgments of me. And I can often tell when that happens. Maybe I fit into a visual archetype of someone else that they've seen in their life or something they've seen in the media. I'm covered in tattoos, though I would argue not scary ones. And I certainly get a lot of that in my life. And everyone does, for their own reasons. Perhaps if someone's wearing a suit, another will consider them to be someone who has a job that you need to wear a suit for, right? And maybe that's correct. Or someone's body language, their posture, leads someone to believe they're a certain type of person. And maybe that's correct, but maybe it's only correct part of the time. The point that I'm trying to make is that we don't quite know. We don't quite know anything based on our initial impression. We only have an impression. And that impression is a culmination of that other party's day at that time, perhaps their mood in the moment, their life circumstance at the time, and then our own trappings and attachments to things in our lives that cause us to judge others. So this wolf in sheep's clothing, sheep in wolf's clothing sort of addition that I've made onto these mugs is something that I think it's a beautiful metaphor. However, what I try and use this metaphor for in my life is to dispel it as a reminder to try to not judge others. Of course, there is evil in the world. And I'm sure there are those who perfectly fit the metaphor of the wolf in sheep's clothing. And thankfully, I've come across very few people like this in my life. But as a very staunch optimist in my life, I would say it is an important mission of mine to try best I can to not make judgments like these, at the peril of possibly being burned by such a person. To live your life assuming the best intentions of those around you is the life I certainly would like to live. So as you can see, I've made this set of 2 mugs. They are definitely larger mugs, a type of mugs for someone who really, really loves coffee or hot chocolate, or wants very large amounts of tea, a mini pot of tea for themselves. And I've coated them in black, as I almost always do for my sgraffito. And I've put these 2 faces, a mirror image of one another, as best I could, in a style that I certainly have been enjoying recently. And I hope you like them too. And I hope that if this mug ever ends up in your hands, or if you're listening or watching to this video while you're making your dinner or something, then it is a reminder to you of someone in your day who you feel maybe you have judged wrongfully, or maybe you have judged too quickly, and that maybe you should give them one more chance. And I would submit that it's in that next chance that you might find a dear friend. So again, as always, if you have any other ideas of fun carvings from folklore of any kind that you would like me to carve in the future, I'm certainly open to hearing it, and I'll think of it next time I get inspired. Have a wonderful day, everyone.